The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was quiet for the first time in years. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their floating chairs. All eyes focused on the large screen at the front of the room. Ambassador Zexthora stood beside the screen, her blue skin darker than usual. The Villani people always turned darker when they were scared. And right now, Zexthora looked almost black. "What we found changes everything we know about our galaxy," she said. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the fear in it. 3 weeks ago, our research team was exploring the outer spiral. They were looking for new mining sites. Instead, they found something that should not exist. The screen flickered to life. Images filled the air above the gathered representatives. Massive stone buildings rose from a dead world surface. The buildings were tall and strange, made from black stone that seemed to eat light. Curved walls twisted up toward the sky in patterns that hurt to look at. Strange symbols covered every surface. "These ruins are old," Zether continued. "Not just old, ancient. Our best scientists say they are at least 45,000 years old. Maybe older. That means they were built before any of our civilizations even existed." A murmur ran through the hall. The oldest known civilization was the Cortani Empire, and even they had only existed for 30,000 years. Before that, the galaxy had been empty of intelligent life, or so everyone had thought. "But age is not what frightens us, Zex," Thokaser said. She touched a control and the images changed. Now they showed close-ups of the strange symbols carved into the stone. "We found writing, lots of writing. It covers every wall, every door, every surface, and we can read some of it." The hall fell completely silent. Reading ancient writing was hard. Most old languages were lost forever. But 17 different research teams had worked on these symbols. They had found something impossible. "The writing is in 17 different languages," Zexthar explained. "All dead languages. Languages that died out thousands of years ago. But they all say the same thing. The same warning over and over again." New words appeared on the screen. They were written in Galactic Standard, the language everyone used, but somehow they felt heavy and dangerous. "They are sleeping. Do not wake them. We kept the vigil. The silent ones will return." The silence in the hall was complete now. Not one representative moved or spoke. The words hung in the air like a threat. "Who are the silent ones?" asked Representative Kor from his floating chair. He was old, even for a Tashari, and his green feathers were almost white with age. "And who wrote these warnings?" Zathura touched her controls again. This time, the screen showed a different kind of image. It looked like a crystal, but it glowed with soft blue light. Strange patterns moved inside it. "We found this data crystal in the deepest part of the ruins," she said. "It took our best scientists 2 weeks to figure out how to read it. What we found inside makes the warnings look simple." The crystal's glow grew brighter on the screen. Then words began to appear. Not symbols this time, but actual words and languages they could understand. "The crystal contains fragments of historical records," Sexatha explained. "They tell the story of a species that once ruled half our galaxy. A species called humans." More murmurs filled the hall. No one had ever heard of humans before. The galactic database had no record of them. How could an entire species just disappear from history? "According to these records, humans came from a world called Earth," Zexthera continued. "They were bipedal mammals, similar to several species we know today, but they were different in important ways. They could live almost anywhere. Hot worlds, cold worlds, high gravity, low gravity. They adapted to everything." Images appeared on the screen. They showed creatures that looked a bit like the Tashari, but without feathers. A bit like the Villani, but without the blue skin. They stood upright on 2 legs and had 2 arms. Their faces were smooth with small eyes and strange mouth shapes. They built cities on 1,000 worlds. Zexter said they explored every corner of space we have mapped, and many places we have not. They were builders and explorers, but when they needed to be, they were also warriors. The images changed again. Now, they showed massive ships flying through space. The ships were huge, bigger than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. They had smooth, curved hulls that seemed to flow like water. But despite their beauty, there was something dangerous about them. The records say humans were the most effective fighters the galaxy had ever seen. Zexthera explained. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they never gave up. They would keep fighting when any other species would surrender. They would find a way to win when winning seemed impossible. Representative Korv leaned forward in his chair. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? Where are they now? Zexathar's skin grew even darker. That is the mystery. 40,000 years ago, they just vanished. Every human world, every human station, every human ship, gone all at the same time. No battles, no invasions, no natural disasters. They just left empty cities behind and disappeared into space. Perhaps they died out, suggested Representative Mira from the dolphin-like Aquar delegation. Disease, maybe, or some internal war. No, Zetherthor said firmly. The cities show no signs of battle or plague. The humans just left. But before they did, they left those warnings. Warnings about something sleeping, something they were watching. And they called themselves the Silent Ones. The hall was quiet again. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. If humans had been so powerful, what could have made them leave? What could have scared them so much that they would abandon their entire civilization? There is something else, Zexa said. Her voice was almost a whisper now. Something we detected 3 days ago. She touched her controls one more time. The screen now showed a map of the galaxy. Thousands of dots marked the locations of known civilizations. Lines showed the major trade routes and communication networks. It was a map everyone had seen many times before. But now there was something new on the map. A red line moving slowly across the galaxy in a perfect spiral pattern. It touched every major star system, but never stopped at any of them. Long-range sensors detected this energy signature moving through hyperspace. Zexthera explained. It is unlike anything in our databases. The signature is massive, bigger than anything we have ever built, and it is moving in a pattern that will take it to every inhabited system in the galaxy. What kind of pattern? Asked Representative Korv. A mathematical one, Zether replied. Perfect and precise. It will take exactly 733 years to complete one full spiral. Then it will start again. This is not random movement. This is the work of intelligence. Representative Mira's large eyes grew even larger. Could it be the humans? Could they be returning? We do not know, Zexthera admitted. The energy signature matches no known technology, but the mathematical precision fits what we know about human engineering. They always built things with perfect mathematical relationships. The red line on the screen continued its slow spiral across the galaxy. Everyone in the hall watched it move, thinking about what it might mean. Were the humans coming back after 40,000 years? And if they were, why now? There is one more thing. Zexthera said the spiral pattern is not random. Our mathematicians have analyzed it. The signature visits every star system in a specific order. It checks the systems where we found the warnings first. Then it moves to systems where we found other human ruins. It is following a path that only someone with detailed knowledge of human history could know. The implications hit everyone at the same time. If something was following human historical sites, it had to know about humans. It had to have some connection to the vanished species. What are our options? Asked Representative Korv. We have sent scout ships to intercept the signal, Zaxter replied. But they are still 3 days away from making contact. Until then, we can only wait and watch. And if it is hostile? Asked Representative Mira. Zaxthera was quiet for a long moment. According to the records, humans commanded technology we cannot understand. If they have returned and they mean us harm, our fleets would not be able to stop them. The hall fell silent again. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. The galaxy had been peaceful for thousands of years. Wars were rare and small. The Galactic Council kept order through discussion and agreement. But now, they might be facing something beyond their understanding. What about the warnings? Asked a new voice. Representative Thane from the insect-like Zephyr delegation rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. The warning said the Silent Ones would return, but they also said something was sleeping. What if the humans did not leave by choice? What if they left to guard against something else? Zexthera nodded slowly. That is what frightens me most, she said. The warnings were not just about humans returning. They were about something else. Something the humans were watching. something they did not want anyone to wake up. "And now?" asked Representative Thane. "Now we have expanded across the galaxy," Zexthera replied. "We have built cities and stations in places that were empty for 40,000 years. We have explored regions of space that the old maps marked as forbidden. What if we have gone somewhere we should not have gone? What if we have disturbed something that was meant to stay asleep?" The red line continued its spiral across the galactic map. Everyone watched it move, knowing that in 3 days they would have their answers. The scout ships would make contact with whatever was creating the signal. They would learn if the humans were truly returning, and if they were, whether they came as friends or enemies. But deep in their hearts, everyone in the hall knew that the galaxy was about to change forever. The age of peaceful expansion was ending. The Silent Ones were returning, and with them would come answers to questions the galaxy was not sure it wanted to ask. As the session ended, and the representatives returned to their ships, the red line continued its patient spiral across the stars. Somewhere in the depths of space, something that had been waiting for 40,000 years was finally coming home. Captain Saraveos had volunteered for the deep space mission because she was bored. 20 years of flying trade routes between safe known worlds had left her hungry for adventure. When the Galactic Council asked for volunteers to investigate the mysterious energy signature, she was the first to raise her hand, now floating in her command chair aboard the exploration ship Meridian. She was starting to think boredom might not have been so bad after all. Captain called her science officer, Dr. Keithmore. The small, furry Rillan was staring at his screens with all 4 of his eyes wide open. "You need to see this." Sarah moved her chair closer to his station. On his main screen was an image that made no sense. A ship floated in the darkness ahead of them, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a small hill. The thing was massive beyond belief, easily the size of a small moon. "How big is it?" Sarah asked. "Approximately 800 kilometers long," Dr. Keithmore replied. His voice was steady, but his fur was standing up straight. Among his people, that was a sign of extreme nervousness. 400 kilometers wide. "The mass readings are impossible." Sarah looked at the ship again. It did not look like anything in the galactic databases. Instead of the straight lines and sharp angles that most civilizations used, this ship was all curves and flowing shapes. It looked like it had been grown rather than built. The hull was dark, almost black, but it seemed to shimmer with patterns that moved like oil on water. "Life signs?" she asked. "That is the impossible part," Dr. Keithmore said. "I am detecting thousands of life signs. Thousands. But they are all in some kind of deep sleep state. Their brain activity is minimal, but it is there." "A generation ship," suggested Lieutenant Parks from the navigation station. The young human-like Tan had joined the crew only 6 months ago. Maybe they were traveling somewhere and had to put their people in sleep chambers. Dr. Keithmore shook his head. "The energy patterns are wrong for normal sleep chambers. This is something else, something much more complex." As they watched, lights began to flicker along the massive ship's hull. Not the steady lights of normal ship systems, but patterns that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The pulses started slow, then grew faster. "It is responding to our presence," Dr. Keithmore said. "The ship knows we are here." "How is that possible?" Sarah asked. "Our sensors show no active systems, no crew moving around." "I do not know," the science officer admitted. "But something is definitely happening." The lights continued to pulse, and now they could hear something too. A low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was not quite music, but it was not random noise either. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm that almost made sense. Captain called Communications Officer Zara from her station. "I am receiving a signal from the ship." "No, that is the strange part. The signal is not coming from the ship. It is coming from all around us. Like space itself is talking." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with a sound unlike anything they had ever heard. It was like voices singing, but the voices were not quite right. They were too deep, too complex, as if each voice was actually many voices speaking together. And beneath the singing was something else, a sound like machinery, but machinery that had been running for so long, it had learned to dream. "Can you understand any of it?" Sarah asked. Zara worked at her controls for several minutes. "Some of it is in old languages, languages that died out thousands of years ago. but there are patterns I recognize. Give me a moment. The singing continued, growing louder and more complex. The lights on the massive ship pulsed faster, and now they could see that sections of the hull were opening, not breaking apart, but unfolding like flower petals. Smooth passages revealed themselves, lit by that same strange pulsing light. I think it is an invitation, Zara said. Finally, the patterns match greeting protocols from several ancient languages. It wants us to come aboard. That could be a trap, Lieutenant Parks pointed out. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But if this ship is connected to the energy signature the Council detected, we need to investigate. This might be our only chance to get answers. She made her decision. Prepare a shuttle. Dr. Keithmore, you are with me. Lieutenant Parks, you have the bridge. If we are not back in 6 hours, return to Council space and report what you found. Captain Parks said, maybe we should wait for backup. The nearest Council ship is 3 days away. Sarah replied, if this ship decides to leave, we might never get another chance. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself piloting a small shuttle toward one of the open passages in the massive ship's hull. Dr. Keithmore sat beside her, his instruments recording everything, behind them. Security Chief Rhaegar checked his weapons for the 5th time. The big Corvani warrior was nervous, which was saying something. His people were known for being fearless. The passage is big enough for our shuttle, Sarah observed. Almost like they expected visitors our size. Or they built it for people their size, and we happened to fit, Dr. Keithmore suggested. As they flew into the passage, the walls around them began to glow. Not electric light, but a soft, warm glow that seemed to come from the material itself. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, flowing past them like water. Some of the symbols looked familiar, though Sarah could not say why. Are you recording this? She asked Dr. Keithmore. Everything, he confirmed. But Captain, these energy readings are beyond anything I have seen. The walls are not just glowing, they are thinking. What do you mean thinking? The patterns of energy flow match neural activity. The ship itself appears to be alive in some way. The passage opened into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The ceiling was so high she could not see it in the dim light. The walls curved away in all directions, covered with more of the flowing symbols, but it was what filled the center of the chamber that made them all stop and stare. Thousands of crystal chambers were arranged in perfect spirals throughout the space. Each chamber was about the size of a person, and each one glowed with soft blue light. Inside the chambers, they could see shapes, people, but not like any people they knew. Humans, Dr. Keithmore whispered. They matched the descriptions from the archaeological records. Sarah moved closer to one of the chambers. Inside was a woman, floating in some kind of liquid. She had smooth skin, no fur or scales or feathers. Her hair was long and dark, and her face was peaceful. She looked like she was sleeping, but there was something more. Patterns of light moved beneath her closed eyelids, as if she was dreaming. How many? Sarah asked. Dr. Keithmore consulted his scanner. At least 50,000 in this chamber alone, and I am detecting similar chambers throughout the ship. All humans, as far as I can tell. But Captain, these readings are strange. They are not just in suspended animation. Their minds are active. Very active. It is like they are all having the same dream. Security Chief Rhaegar pointed his weapon toward a sound from across the chamber. Something is moving. They turned to see one of the crystal chambers opening. The liquid inside drained away, and the woman they had been looking at began to stir. Her eyes opened and she looked directly at them. Sarah expected her to be confused or afraid. Instead, the woman smiled. How long? She asked. Her voice was clear and strong, and she spoke perfect galactic standard. How long? What? Sarah replied. How long have we been sleeping? The woman asked as she stepped out of the chamber. She was wearing a simple gray outfit that seemed to fit perfectly. I need to know how much time has passed. Dr. Kettmore stepped forward. According to our records, humans disappeared from the galaxy 40,000 years ago. The woman nodded, as if this was exactly what she had expected. Then it is time. Time for what? Sarah asked. Instead of answering, the woman walked to a section of the wall covered with symbols. She placed her hand on the wall, and the symbols began to change. New patterns flowed across the surface, and the chamber filled with a low humming sound. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez," the woman said. "I am the wake-up coordinator for this vessel, and you have arrived just in time for the most important moment in galactic history." More chambers began to open throughout the vast space. Men and women emerged, all moving with the same calm confidence as Dr. Vasquez. They spoke to each other in quiet voices, checking instruments that appeared on the walls when they touched them. "We need to go," Dr. Vasquez said to Sarah. "The others will want to meet you. They have been waiting a very long time for this moment." "The others?" Sarah asked. "The command crew," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They have been awake in the deep levels, maintaining the ship and monitoring the galaxy. They knew you were coming long before your sensors detected us." As they followed Dr. Vasquez through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked, Dr. Keithmore whispered to Sarah, "Captain, the energy readings from this ship are impossible. It is using technology that should not exist." "I know," Sarah whispered back. "But Dr. Vasquez speaks our language perfectly." "How is that possible? Galactic Standard was developed only 5,000 years ago." "I heard that," Dr. Vasquez said without turning around. "We have been monitoring galactic communications for the entire time we were asleep. We learned your languages, studied your cultures, watched your civilizations grow. We had to know when the time was right." "The time for what?" Sarah asked again. This time, Dr. Vasquez stopped walking and turned to face them. Her expression was serious, almost sad. "The time to wake up," she said. "The time to return to the galaxy. The time to fulfill our promise." "What promise?" Security Chief Regar asked. He had kept his weapon ready, but something about Dr. Vasquez made him want to lower it. "The promise we made 40,000 years ago," she replied. "The promise to protect the galaxy from something it cannot protect itself from. Something that is stirring again. Because the galaxy has grown too large, spread too far, gone to places it should not go." They reached a massive door that opened at their approach. Beyond it was a command center that made the bridge of the Meridian look like a toy. Dozens of humans worked at stations that seemed to respond to their thoughts rather than their touch. Holographic displays showed star maps, energy patterns, and readings that Dr. Keithmore did not recognize. A man in a dark uniform approached them. He was tall and had gray hair, but his eyes were young and alert. "Dr. Vasquez, are these our guests?" "Yes, Commander Chen," she replied. "Captain Sarah Voss of the Galactic Council ship Meridian." Commander Chen extended his hand to Sarah in a gesture she did not recognize. When she took it, he shook it gently. "Welcome aboard the Eternal Vigil, Captain. We have much to discuss and very little time to do it." Commander Sarah said, "We need to understand what is happening. The Galactic Council is concerned about the energy signature your ship has been creating." "As they should be," Commander Chen replied. "That signature is not just from our ship. It is from our entire fleet. We have been patrolling the galaxy for 40,000 years, keeping watch on places your people should never go. But now those places are stirring, and our patrol is no longer enough." "What kind of places?" Dr. Keithmore asked. Commander Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Places where reality grows thin, Dr. Keithmore. Places where something waits that should never be allowed to wake up. Places your expanding civilization has been building colonies dangerously close to the command center around them, hummed with activity as more humans awakened and took their stations." Outside, Sarah could see through the transparent walls that other ships were approaching. Ships like the Eternal Vigil, massive and impossible, with the same flowing designs and glowing hulls. "How many ships?" she asked. "Enough," Commander Chen replied. "We knew this day would come. We have been preparing for 40,000 years. Now it is time to see if our preparations were sufficient." Dr. Vasquez touched a control, and a new display appeared in the air above them. It showed the galaxy with thousands of red points scattered throughout. "These are the danger zones," she explained. "Places where the barriers between realities are weak. For 40,000 years we have been watching them, keeping them stable. But your civilization has expanded into 3 of them in the last century." "And that is bad?" Sarah asked. Commander Chen's expression grew grim. "Captain, you have no idea. The conference room aboard the Eternal Vigil was unlike anything Captain Sarah Voss had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living light, shifting and flowing with patterns that almost made sense. Representatives from the Galactic Council sat around a table that appeared to be carved from a single piece of crystal, facing the humans who had awakened from their 40,000-year sleep. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the head of the table, her hands resting on a device that projected images into the air above them. Commander James Chen sat beside her, his gray hair reflecting the strange light from the walls. Behind them, other humans worked quietly at stations that seemed to respond to their thoughts. "Before we begin," Dr. Vasquez said, "you need to understand what you are seeing. This ship, these people, this technology, none of it should exist according to your current understanding of physics." Ambassador Zexathara, who had arrived with the council delegation 6 hours earlier, leaned forward in her chair. "What do you mean? 40,000 years ago, we learned that the universe is not what it appears to be," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Reality has layers. What you see, what you measure with your instruments, what you call the physical universe, is only the surface. Beneath it are deeper levels where thought becomes real. Where will shapes matter? Where the very concept of existence can be challenged." Dr. Keithmore raised one of his 4 hands. "That sounds like philosophy, not science." Commander Chen spoke for the first time. "Dr. Keithmore, what is the square root of -1? The scientist blinked in confusion. "That is an imaginary number. It has no real value." "Exactly," Chen said. "But imaginary numbers are essential for understanding quantum mechanics, aren't they? Just because something is imaginary doesn't mean it isn't real in the ways that matter." Dr. Vasquez touched her device, and the air above the table filled with new images. They showed star charts, but not like any star charts the council representatives had seen. These charts had extra dimensions, layers upon layers of space that folded in on themselves. 43,000 years ago, humanity encountered something that existed in those deeper layers, she continued. Something that was old when our galaxy was young. Something that had been sleeping in the spaces between realities. "What kind of something?" asked Representative Korv. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful, as if the words themselves were dangerous. "We never gave it a name," she said. "Names have power in the deep layers. To name something is to give it more reality. But we can describe what it does. It unmakes things, not just destroys them. It makes them never have existed in the first place." The conference room fell silent. The concept was hard to even think about. "How did you encounter it?" Ambassador Zathara asked. Commander Chen stood and walked to the wall, which immediately displayed new images at his approach. "We were explorers then, pushing into regions of space that had never been mapped. One of our deep space missions found something impossible, a star system where the planets orbited in patterns that violated the laws of physics. When our scientists tried to study it, the entire research fleet simply stopped existing." "Stopped existing?" Representative Korv asked. "Not destroyed," Dr. Vasquez clarified. "Unmade. The ships, the crews, the records of their mission, even the memories of the people who had sent them. All of it just wasn't anymore. If we hadn't had automated backup systems that existed in deep storage, we would never have known they had ever existed at all." The images above the table changed again. Now they showed a map of human space, as it had been 43,000 years ago. Hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships, a civilization that spanned half the galaxy. "We tried to quarantine the area," Commander Chen continued. "We set up warning beacons, established patrol routes to keep ships away. But the effect was spreading. Reality around the anomaly was becoming unstable. Stars began to flicker in and out of existence. Planets would be there one day and gone the next, with no record they had ever been there. So you fought it," said Security Chief Rhaegar. The Corvani warrior understood battles, even if he didn't understand the enemy. For 3,000 years, Dr. Vasquez confirmed it was unlike any war ever fought. How do you battle something that exists in the spaces between thoughts? How do you destroy something that can make your weapons never have existed? New images appeared above the table. They showed human fleets unlike anything in the current galaxy's databases. Ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Weapons that fired concepts instead of energy. shields that protected not just against physical attack, but against the very idea of attack. We learned to fight in the deep layers, Commander Chen explained. We developed technology that worked with thought and will, instead of just matter and energy. We became something more than just a physical species. We learned to dream with purpose. Dream? Dr. Keithmore asked. In the deep layers, dreams are real. Dr. Vasquez said, imagination has substance. Will can reshape reality. We trained our minds to work together, to dream the same dreams, to impose our vision of reality on spaces where reality was negotiable. The images showed battles that hurt to look at. Space twisted and folded. Time ran backward and forward at the same time, and human ships moved through dimensions that had no names. For 3,000 years, we held the line, Commander Chen continued. We contained the entity, prevented it from spreading further, but we could not destroy it. Every time we thought we had won, it would adapt, find a new way to attack reality itself. So what did you do? Ambassador Zexthera asked. Dr. Vasquez sat down heavily in her chair. We made the hardest decision in human history. We realized that the entity fed on conflict, grew stronger with each battle. The only way to contain it was to stop fighting in the traditional sense. You surrendered, Representative Corvast. No, Commander Chen said firmly. We evolved. We developed a new strategy. Instead of fighting the entity directly, we would contain it by becoming its eternal guards. We would sleep on the borders of reality, dreaming barriers into existence, maintaining the walls between what is and what should never be. The images above the table changed one final time. Now they showed the human fleet as it existed today. Hundreds of massive ships like the Eternal Vigil, each one containing thousands of sleeping humans. But these were not ordinary sleep chambers. We created the fleet of memory, Dr. Vasquez explained. Ships that exist partially outside normal space-time. Each ship is crewed by volunteers who agreed to sleep for as long as necessary, dreaming the galaxy safe. For 40,000 years, Dr. Keithmore asked, amazed. 40,000 years? Commander Chen confirmed. Every human in those sleep chambers has been dreaming the same dream. A dream of strong walls, of barriers that cannot be crossed, of an entity contained and sleeping. Our dreams became reality, in the deep layers holding the darkness at bay. Ambassador Zexthera leaned back in her chair. But why reveal yourselves now? Why wake up after so long? Dr. Vasquez's expression grew grim. Because your civilization has grown beyond the safe boundaries. Your expansion has taken you too close to the weak spots in reality. 3 of your colonies are now built directly on top of barrier points we have been maintaining for millennia. She touched her device and a new star map appeared. This one showed current galactic civilization with trade routes and colony worlds marked in blue. But there were also red zones scattered throughout, and several blue dots were very close to red ones. The colony on Zirion 7, she continued. The mining station at Kepler's Gate, the research facility at Far Reach. All of them are built on places where reality is thin, where our dreaming guardians have been working to keep the barriers strong. Are you saying our colonies are in danger? Representative Corvest. Worse, Commander Chen replied. Your colonies are weakening the barriers. Every ship that docks at those stations, every mining operation that digs deep into those worlds, every research project that probes into areas you don't understand. All of it is straining the walls we have spent 40,000 years building. Dr. Keithmore's fur was standing straight up again. What happens if the barriers fail? The entity wakes up, Dr. Vasquez said simply. And this time there is a lot more galaxy for it to unmake. The conference room was silent, as everyone absorbed the implications. The peaceful expansion that had defined galactic civilization for thousands of years had brought them to the edge of something unthinkable. What do you want us to do? Ambassador Zexthera asked finally. Help us, Dr. Vasquez replied. For 40,000 years, we have been fighting alone. But we always knew this day would come. The entity is stirring again, responding to the changes your civilization has brought to the galaxy. Our fleet alone may not be enough this time. How can we help? Representative Corvest, you said yourselves that this enemy exists in places our technology cannot reach. Commander Chen stood again. Your technology cannot reach those places, but your minds can. We can teach some of your people to dream fight. to join us in the deep layers. Not many, but enough to strengthen our barriers to give us the extra power we need to keep the entity contained. And if we refuse? Security Chief Rhaegar asked. Dr. Vasquez looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Then you will face the entity alone when it finally breaks free. And I promise you, Chief Rhaegar, your weapons will be useless against something that can make the very concept of weapons cease to exist. The silence stretched on as the council representatives thought about what they had learned. Finally, Ambassador Zexathera spoke. If we agree to help, what exactly are you asking us to do? First, evacuate the 3 critical colonies immediately, Dr. Vasquez said. Those barriers are already weakening. We need to remove all unnecessary strain. Second, Commander Chen added, provide volunteers for dreamfight training, people with strong wills and stable minds. The training is dangerous, and not everyone can survive learning to fight in the deep layers. And third, Dr. Vasquez concluded, prepare your fleets for a war unlike any ever fought. If our barriers fail, if the entity breaks free, you will need every ship, every weapon, every person willing to stand between reality and oblivion. Ambassador Zexatha looked around the table at her fellow representatives. One by one, they nodded. We will take your proposal to the full council, she said. But Ambassador, I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we will help however we can. Dr. Vasquez smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Thank you. But remember, Ambassador, time is not on our side. Even now, our sensors are detecting fluctuations in the barrier zones. The entity knows something has changed. It is beginning to test our defenses. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Commander Chen immediately moved to one of the wall stations, which lit up at his touch. What is it? Dr. Vasquez asked. Chen's face was grim. Breach in Sector 7. The barrier around the Zirion system is failing. Dr. Vasquez turned to the council representatives. It looks like the war has already begun. Admiral Sarah Cross had been dreaming of war for 40,000 years, now standing on the bridge of the eternal vigil, as reality itself came under attack. She finally understood why those dreams had been necessary. Report, she said, her voice calmed. Despite the chaos around them, officers worked frantically at stations that glowed with impossible light, monitoring threats that existed in dimensions most people couldn't even imagine. Barrier breach confirmed in the Zirion system, reported Lieutenant Torres from the tactical station. The mining operations there have created fractures in local space-time. The entity is using those fractures to push through. Admiral Cross turned to Captain Sarah Voss, who stood nearby with the other council representatives. The Galactic Council had agreed to help, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They were about to witness something their civilizations had no words for. Captain, I need you to contact your fleet immediately, Cross said. Tell them to stay away from the Zirion system. Do not approach, do not investigate, do not try to help. Any ship that enters that area will only make things worse. Worse how? Captain Voss asked. Before Cross could answer, the main display showed them. The Zirion system appeared on screen, but it looked wrong. The star flickered between different colors, sometimes blue, sometimes red, sometimes colors that hurt to look at. The planets orbited in patterns that violated physics, moving in loops and spirals that should have torn them apart. The entity doesn't just destroy things, Dr. Elena Vasquez explained as she joined them on the bridge. It changes the rules in areas under its influence. Physics becomes unreliable. Cause and effect breakdown. Time flows in circles. Consciousness becomes negotiable. What do you mean negotiable? Asked Dr. Keith Moore. Watch, Admiral Cross said grimly. The display zoomed in on one of Zirion's planets. A mining colony was visible on the surface, but as they watched, the buildings began to change. Some grew taller, stretching impossibly into the sky. Others melted like wax flowing across the landscape in rivers of metal and stone, and some simply blinked out of existence, as if they had never been built at all. The colonists, Captain Voss whispered. Are they? Some are dead, Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Some are alive but changed into things that were never meant to exist. And some are caught in temporal loops, living the same moments over and over again without realizing it. The display showed figures moving on the planet's surface, but they moved wrong. Some walked backward while thinking they were going forward. Others moved through solid walls as if they were air. A few seemed to be in multiple places at once, their forms scattered across space like broken reflections. This is what happens when reality breaks down, Admiral Cross explained. The entity doesn't follow our rules because it comes from a place where there are no rules. When it enters our space, it brings that chaos with it. How do we fight something like that? Asked Representative Corv, who had joined the council delegation on the human ship. Admiral Cross smiled grimly. Very carefully, and with weapons your people have never seen. She gestured, and the bridge around them began to change. The walls became transparent, showing the space outside. But it wasn't normal space. They could see other dimensions layered on top of each other, like sheets of glass. In some layers, the stars were different colors. In others, they moved in patterns that spelled out words and languages that didn't exist. This is how we see the universe now, Dr. Vasquez explained, in all its layers at once. The entity exists primarily in the deeper layers where thought and reality blend together. To fight it, we have to go there too. Other ships were becoming visible in the layered space around them. Ships like the Eternal Vigil, massive and impossible, their hulls flowing with patterns of light. But these weren't just moving through normal space. They were traveling through the layers of reality itself, sliding between dimensions like fish through water. The dream of Terra, the memory of Mars, the song of distant Earth. Admiral Cross named them as they appeared. Each ship is a fortress in the deep layers, crewed by people who have learned to fight with their minds instead of just their weapons. How many ships do you have? Captain Voss asked. 373, Cross replied, each one containing between 50 and 100,000 sleeping guardians. For 40,000 years, they have been dreaming barriers into existence, holding the darkness at bay. The tactical display changed, showing the approaching human fleet in formation around the breached barrier. But this wasn't a normal military formation. The ships moved in spirals and circles, creating patterns that seemed to have meaning beyond mere strategy. Each ship's position creates a mandala of protection, Dr. Vasquez explained. The geometry itself has power in the deep layers. Our formation is both a battle array and a prayer made manifest. A prayer to what? Asked Dr. Keithmore. To the idea that reality should remain stable, Admiral Cross said. To the concept that existence is better than non-existence. To the hope that consciousness can triumph over chaos. Alarms sounded again, and the display shifted to show new breaches opening throughout the galaxy, not just at Zarian, but at the other colony sites the humans had warned about. The entity was pushing through in multiple places at once. It's learning, Admiral Cross said grimly. For 40,000 years, it has been testing our barriers, finding weak points. Now, it's using everything it has learned to attack simultaneously. The images from the breach sites were horrifying. At Kepler's Gate mining station, the asteroids had begun to move in impossible ways, forming shapes that spelled out concepts too dangerous to think about. Ships that tried to evacuate found their engines working backward, pushing them toward the danger instead of away from it. At the Far Reach Research Facility, the scientists had been studying dark matter when reality around them simply stopped making sense. Some of them were now existing in multiple time streams at once, aging and growing younger simultaneously. Others had become living equations. Their bodies transformed into mathematical formulas that walked around the station. This is what your expansion into forbidden space has caused, Admiral Cross said to the council representatives. By building in areas where reality is thin, you've given the entity footholds in our dimension. We didn't know, Captain Voss said desperately. If you had warned us, we tried, Dr. Vasquez interrupted. The warnings were carved into every human ruin your people found. They are sleeping. Do not wake them. But you thought it was primitive superstition, because it sounded like superstition, Representative Corv protested. Warnings about sleeping gods and ancient evils. No rational species would take such things seriously. Admiral Cross turned to face him directly. Representative, what is the most rational response to a threat that exists beyond reason? How do you prepare for something that can make the very concept of preparation meaningless? Before Corv could answer, new alarms sounded. This time, the threat was closer to home. Admiral Lieutenant Torres called from his station. Massive distortion forming at the edge of the system. Something is coming through. The main display showed empty space, but as they watched, reality began to bend and twist. Stars in the background seemed to stretch like taffy, and space itself developed cracks that leaked impossible colors. All ships, battle stations, Admiral Cross commanded, prepare for deep layer engagement. Around them, the human fleet began to change. The ship's hulls became translucent, showing the sleeping chambers within. But now the chambers were glowing brighter, and patterns of light were flowing between them like neural pathways. The sleeping guardians are linking their dreams, Dr. Vasquez explained to the watching council representatives. Together, they will create a barrier of pure will around this system. What can we do to help? Captain Voss asked. Stay back and observe, Admiral Cross replied. This first battle will tell us how much the entity has grown in power. If our current forces are not enough, we will need to wake more guardians and train your people faster than we had hoped. The distortion in space grew larger, and something began to emerge from it. It wasn't a ship or a creature, in any sense that made sense. It was a concept given form, an idea that had learned to hate existence. It looked like a hole in reality, shaped like a thought, surrounded by fragments of things that had never been allowed to exist. All ships engage, Admiral Cross commanded. The human fleet opened fire, but their weapons were unlike anything the council representatives had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired pure concepts, hope given destructive form, the memory of sunlight weaponized against darkness. Dreams of safety made manifest as shields. The entity responded with attacks of its own. Waves of non-existence washed over the human ships, trying to convince them they had never been built. Concepts of despair and meaninglessness hammered against their defenses, but the human ships held. The sleeping guardians' dreams formed layers of protection that the entity couldn't penetrate. Every attack was met with a counter-dream. Every assault on reality answered with a stronger affirmation of existence. It's working, Dr. Vasquez said with relief. The barriers are holding, but Admiral Cross wasn't smiling. This is just a probe, she said. The entity is testing our current strength. The real attack will come when it knows what we're capable of. As if responding to her words, the entity suddenly withdrew. The distortion in space collapsed, and the impossible presence vanished back into the deeper layers of reality. Is it over? Captain Voss asked. No, Admiral Cross replied. It's just beginning. The entity now knows we're awake again, and it knows how strong our current defenses are. It will gather its forces and return with everything it has. She turned to face the council representatives directly. Captain, you need to return to your people immediately. Tell them what you've seen here. The galaxy has perhaps days before the entity launches its full assault. We need every ship, every weapon, and every mind willing to join the fight. What about the other breach sites? Representative Corvus. We'll contain them as best we can, Dr. Vasquez said, but our fleet is stretched thin. If the entity attacks all the breach points simultaneously while also hitting us here, we may not be able to hold all the barriers. Admiral Cross walked to the transparent wall of the bridge, looking out at the layered dimensions of space. In the deeper layers, she could see movement, vast shapes stirring in the darkness between realities, preparing for war. For 40,000 years, we've been the galaxy's guardians in secret, she said quietly. We fought battles in places where thought becomes real, holding back horrors that would unmake existence itself. But now, the secret war is about to become very public. She turned back to the council representatives. Go to your people. Tell them that the age of innocence is over. The galaxy is about to learn that there are some frontiers that should never be crossed, some boundaries that exist for very good reasons. As the council delegation prepared to leave for their ship, Dr. Vasquez caught Captain Voss's arm. Captain, she said quietly, when you report to the council, make sure they understand one thing. This isn't a war we can win through conventional means. If we're going to survive what's coming, your people will need to learn to fight with more than just weapons. They'll need to learn to fight with their very souls. Outside, in the depths of space, where reality grew thin, something ancient and hungry was gathering its strength for the final assault on existence itself. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 3 days. Representatives from every member world argued, debated, and finally accepted the impossible truth. Their galaxy was under attack by something that existed beyond their understanding, and their only hope lay with a species that had supposedly vanished 40,000 years ago. Captain Sarave stood before the assembled delegates in the Great Hall, showing them recordings from the human ships, images of reality breaking down, of space itself becoming unreliable, of an enemy that could make existence itself negotiable. "The evacuation of all 3 colonies is already underway," she reported. "But Admiral Cross warns that this may only buy us time. The entity has been growing stronger for millennia, and now it knows we are aware of it." Ambassador Zathara rose from her floating chair. "Have any other species volunteered for this dream-fighting training?" Surprisingly, "Yes," Captain Voss replied. "The Tashari have offered 50 volunteers. The Aquari delegation has provided 23. Even the Corvani, despite their preference for conventional warfare, have sent 12 of their warriors." Representative Korv nodded approvingly. "My people understand that some battles require weapons of the spirit as much as weapons of steel." "Where will this training take place?" asked Representative Mira. "Aboard the human ships," Captain Voss explained. "The fleet of memory exists partially outside normal space-time. The volunteers will need to learn to function in environments where thought becomes reality, where will can reshape matter." What she didn't tell them was how dangerous the training was. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been honest about the risks. Not everyone who attempted to learn dream fighting survived the process. The human mind had evolved over 40,000 years to handle the deep layers of reality. Other species were less adaptable, but they had no choice. The entity's attacks were growing stronger and more frequent. Just that morning, they had received reports of reality distortions in 12 different star systems. Space stations were reporting that their corridors led to rooms that didn't exist. Cargo ships were arriving at destinations they had never visited, and on 3 different worlds, people were aging backward or forward at random rates. "There is something else," Captain Voss continued. "Admiral Cross has requested that all member fleets be placed under unified command. She says that conventional tactics will not work against this enemy." "Unified under whose command?" asked Representative Thane. "Hers," Captain Voss replied. "She has 40,000 years of experience fighting this enemy. She knows its tactics, its capabilities, its weaknesses." The debate that followed was intense, but brief. In the end, faced with an enemy that could unmake existence itself, the Council voted to grant Admiral Cross emergency authority over all galactic defense forces. 2 days later, Captain Voss found herself back aboard the Eternal Vigil, watching as volunteers from across the galaxy learned to fight with their minds instead of their weapons. The training took place in chambers that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Volunteers lay in crystal pods similar to those used by the sleeping guardians, but these pods were designed for conscious minds rather than dreaming ones. Dr. Vasquez moved between the pods, monitoring each volunteer's progress. "The key is to understand that in the deep layers intention shapes reality," she explained to Captain Voss as they watched. "A weapon is only as real as the person wielding it believes it to be. A shield only protects if the defender truly understands what protection means." "How do you teach someone to believe differently about reality?" Captain Voss asked. "Very carefully," Dr. Vasquez replied. "And not everyone can learn. Watch." She indicated one of the pods where a young Tashari officer was training. In the pod's display, they could see what the volunteer was experiencing. He stood in a space that looked like the interior of a ship, but the walls were made of crystallized starlight, and the floor was a sea of liquid mathematics. "Lieutenant Keksavar is learning to navigate conceptual space," Dr. Vasquez explained. "In the deep layers, you don't move by walking. You move by understanding where you want to be and why you deserve to be there." As they watched, the Tashari officer began to glow with soft light. He was learning to make his own existence more real, more solid, more undeniable. "He's a natural," Dr. Vasquez said with approval. "Some people have minds that adapt quickly to nonlinear reality. Others," she gestured to another pod where a Corvani warrior was struggling. In his display, he kept trying to fight conceptual enemies with imaginary swords and kept failing because he couldn't accept that swords were just another form of focused will. "How long does the training take?" Captain Voss asked. "For basic competency?" 2 weeks for true effectiveness years. But we don't have years. Alarms suddenly echoed through the training chamber. Dr. Vasquez immediately moved to a wall station, which lit up at her touch. "What is it?" Captain Voss asked. "Major breach forming at the galactic core," Dr. Vasquez replied grimly. "All the smaller attacks were just diversions. The entity is making its real move." They hurried to the bridge where Admiral Cross was coordinating the response. The main display showed the galaxy from a perspective that included all the layers of reality. At the very center, where the massive black hole anchored their spiral of stars, something impossible was taking shape. The entity is using the gravitational anomaly of the galactic core to tear a permanent rift between dimensions, Admiral Cross explained as they joined her. "If it succeeds, it won't need to break through barriers anymore. It will have a permanent gateway into our reality." "How long do we have?" Captain Voss asked. 6 hours, Cross replied. "Maybe less." The human fleet was already moving, sliding through layers of space-time toward the galactic center. But this time, they weren't alone. Ships from every member species of the Galactic Council flew alongside them, their crews preparing for a battle unlike any ever fought. Admiral called Commander Chen from the tactical station. "We're receiving reports from the volunteer trainees. 43 individuals have achieved basic dream fighting capability." "Not enough," Cross said grimly. "But it will have to do." As they approached the galactic core, the true scale of the threat became clear. The entity wasn't just breaking through reality, it was rewriting it. Space around the central black hole had become a maze of impossible geometry, where straight lines curved back on themselves and time flowed in spirals. "All ships assume Mandela formation," Admiral Cross commanded. "Conventional vessels to the outer rings, dream fighters to the inner circles." The combined fleet arranged itself in a vast pattern around the galactic core. Human ships formed the center, their hulls glowing with the dreams of their sleeping guardians. Around them, council ships took defensive positions, their crews preparing to provide support they didn't fully understand. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez called from her station, "the entity is emerging." What came through the rift defied description. It was larger than planets, but had no fixed size. It was darker than space, but glowed with anti-light. It was shaped like hunger given form, like the concept of ending made manifest. "All dream fighters engage," Admiral Cross commanded. The battle that followed took place in dimensions that had no names. In normal space, the human ships appeared to simply hover motionless, while strange lights played along their hulls. But in the deep layers, an epic struggle was unfolding. Dr. Elena Vasquez, connected to the ship's dream fighting systems, found herself standing on a battlefield made of crystallized time. Around her, the volunteers she had trained fought alongside sleeping guardians who had been dreaming of this moment for 40,000 years. The entity's attacks came as waves of pure negation. Concepts like never was and should not be hammered against their defenses. But the combined fleet responded with something the entity had never faced before. "We are," Vasquez declared, her voice echoing across impossible distances. Around her, thousands of voices joined in. Human, Tashar, Aquari, Corvani, every species in the galaxy speaking as one. "We exist," they continued. "We matter. We choose to be." The entity faltered. For 40,000 years, it had faced only human will. Now it confronted the combined determination of an entire galaxy. Dozens of different perspectives on reality. Dozens of different ways of understanding existence. All unified in their refusal to be unmade. But the entity was ancient and powerful. It began to adapt, finding new ways to attack their unified defense. It whispered doubts into their minds, suggesting that existence was painful, that non-being was peaceful, that surrender was easier than struggle. Some of the volunteers began to weaken. The Corvani warrior who had struggled with training suddenly found his sword becoming real, as he finally understood that determination was just another form of focused will. A young Aquari navigator discovered that her ability to find paths through water translated perfectly to finding paths through conceptual space. But it wasn't enough. The entity was too strong, too ancient, too hungry for oblivion. Then Dr. Elena Vasquez made a decision that would echo through galactic history. She dove deeper into the dream fight than anyone had ever gone before. pushing her consciousness directly into the entity's core concept of negation. "I remember," she said, her voice carrying across all layers of reality. "I remember 40,000 years of vigilance. I remember every moment we spent protecting this galaxy. I remember why existence matters." Her memories became weapons. 40,000 years of human dreams, of hopes for the future, of love for life itself. The memories of every species that had ever looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. The simple, undeniable fact that consciousness had chosen to exist, despite all the reasons it might choose not to. The entity screamed across dimensions as Vasquez's memories tore through its core concepts. How could something that sought to unmake existence deal with proof that existence was worth preserving? How could it negate something that had already proven its right to be? But the effort was too much. As the entity retreated, wounded and confused, Dr. Vasquez felt her own existence beginning to fade. She had given too much of herself to the memory weapon. "Elena," Admiral Cross's voice reached her across the dream space. "It's okay," Vasquez replied, her form already becoming translucent. "I understand now. This is what we were always meant to do. Not just guard the galaxy, but prove that it's worth guarding." As her consciousness dissolved into the deep layers of reality, her final thought became a truth that anchored itself in the very structure of space-time. We endure. The entity faced with this paradox, this absolute proof that existence could outlast any attempt to negate it, fled beyond the galactic rim. It wasn't destroyed, but it was contained, held at bay by the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, people would always be ready to stand between existence and void. The battle was over. The immediate threat had passed, but the galaxy would never be the same. In the weeks that followed, the Department of Conceptual Security was established, with Dr. Vasquez's sacrifice as its founding principle. Volunteers from every species learned to dream fight, taking their place alongside the sleeping guardians of the fleet of memory. The human ships resumed their eternal patrol, but now they carried crews from across the galaxy. The ghost ships that walked between stars were no longer alone in their vigil. Captain Sarah Voss, now bearing the title of Conceptual Security Coordinator, established new protocols for galactic expansion. As some frontiers would remain forbidden, some boundaries would never be crossed, and some dark spaces between the stars would always have watchers. The final entry in the Eternal Vigil's log was written by Lieutenant Kexvar, the young Tashari officer who had proven so gifted at dream fighting. "Today, I finally understood what Admiral Cross meant when she said, 'This wasn't a war we could win with weapons. This was a war for the right to exist, and the only way to win such a war is to prove that existence is worth defending.' Dr. Vasquez showed us how to do that. She showed us that memory is the strongest weapon, hope is the best shield, and the willingness to stand guard is the highest form of courage. The galaxy owes her a debt we can never repay, but we can honor her sacrifice by never forgetting why existence matters. We endure, we choose to be, and we will always stand watch in the dark places between realities, keeping the light burning for those who sleep peacefully among the stars. And in the deep dark between galaxies, ancient barriers held firm, watched over by ships that existed in the spaces between thoughts, crewed by beings who had learned that the greatest victory was not conquest, but the simple, stubborn refusal to let the light go out.